These Kenyans that were donating to Morara have since left his camp. They are not comfortable with the Morara they have now, and they have already seen that they made a mistake with Morara. If you go through the comment section in Facebook, say on X, on Instagram, on any other platform that Morara is on, at a TikTok, you will see how Kenyans are telling him the truth as it is.
Of course, tukiangalia whatever is happening right now, we have been seeing politically the temperatures are still high. Na ningependa kujua pia, what is your take, especially for those who are already positioning themselves for the presidency? Tumeona Morara Kebaso is still maintaining that come 2027 is going to be at the ballot, and he wants to send President William Ruto back to Sugoi. Do you feel Morara Kebaso is ready to face on to the president at the moment?
Well, for those that may not be familiar with Morara Kebaso's game, let me break it down to you. When in June and July, the Gen Z movement pushed the creed of a tribeless, a leaderless, and a partyless youth who are committed to fighting and clamoring for better governance, some people saw this as an opportunist to ride on this wave and to take on all this movement for themselves. And Morara was one of those guys. Well, I have already addressed Kasmuel, and everybody knows that Kasmuel was just another Morara. Probably the difference is how they executed their stuff. Kasmuel was too short-sighted, and he ran to Gaucho and to Raila Odinga. Morara appears to have been playing the long game, and in his long game, the idea is still the same, and the principle is still the same. Take up the movement for yourself, and rally the entire movement to support you and to be behind you, so that you can use this movement as your bargaining tool for the elections that are nearing, for the by-elections that are upcoming, and for the presidential elections in 2027. Morara is lying to Kenyans, telling them that he's not interested in becoming an MP or a senator, and that the only seat he's willing to take from Kenyans is the presidency. Imagine mtu hajai kuwa MCA, hatuna track record yake yoyote, anataka kuwa president leo. It looks like a far-fetched thing, and it looks like he's overstepping. And I do not want to denigrate him, because probably to some people he's an ambitious man who wants to save this country because he poses as a savior. But the truth is, Ata Obama, one of the best presidents to ever walk this earth, probably following the footsteps of the likes of Abraham Lincoln, first became a senator, then a president. People have to see a track record of you as a leader before they entrust you with any other position. Mukisa Kitui served Africa in the UN. Omtata has served Kenyans now as the senator of Busia. Say Sifuna, if Sifuna wanted to become president, we would have a track record to look from. We would look at his track record as a senator in Nairobi. I may be an old-timer to some people, because the kind of reasoning I have is people must see a track record of something before they give you the highest office in the land. See, for example, a seat like an MP seat or an MCA seat or a senatorial seat does not really need that threshold of a track record of, say, a position you've served before. But the highest office of the land, which is the presidency, in my own opinion, needs a track record, so that we can see your consistency, we can gauge your integrity, and we can gauge your seriousness and your temperament and so that we can profile you as a befitting candidate for the highest office in the land. And that is my take. And I feel like Morara doesn't have this, because he's angling something different. He wanted and still wants to take up the movement for himself, That is why he's been changing names left, right, and center. At one point, he called himself the leader of the Gen Z. At another point, he called himself the official opposition leader of Kenya. At another time, he called himself the now he calls himself the savior of Kenya, who's out there to give hope to the hopeless people of Kenya. So if you look at the trajectory, it is consistent. Morara is a wheeler dealer, an unscrupulous political who's only interested in taking up the younger generation for himself. He's not even a Gen Z himself, but he's managed to entrench himself in the hearts of Gen Zs and in the hearts of the younger population, and he's successfully managed to convince around 70% of the Gen Zs that he's fighting for them, that he identifies with their struggle, that he understands, even though he's not a Gen Z himself, that the struggle is one, and that he holds the creed of the Gen Zs in his heart, and he wants a better Kenya like we all want. But the truth is, he wants this movement for himself so that he can bargain at the table in 2027 with those that will be serious candidates in the 2027 presidential elections. I would not be shocked if Morara works with Ruto in 2027. Because Kasmuel changed tune while no one saw this coming. I was among the few people who saw the betrayal of Kasmuel before it happened. And I've already talked about the betrayal of Morara before it happens. Ndio ikihappen watu wasiseme, nyinyi hamukutuambia. Sisi tuliwaambia. Morara has worked with Ruto before. He was among the campaigners of Ruto in 2022. And he was launching projects with Ruto as late as 2023. In the spirit of forgiveness, it would make sense if we decided to forget his past and said, well, let's put that behind us. Let's now take on the new Morara, who is anti-Ruto. Now let's take on the new Morara, who is fighting for better governance. But then we cannot ignore the past. We cannot ignore history, because history informs our future. If we decide to forget, and if we decide to close our eyes on the Morara of 2022, then we will be the ones at a loss, because we will have lost an opportunity to gauge the character of Morara going forward, and we will have ourselves to blame when he betrays us, because he will. Because his interest is gaining attraction in the Gen Z movement so that he can negotiate with the Gen Z movement, with whoever will be at the ballot, with the serious candidates in 2027. That is why when Okiya Omtata launched his presidential bid, among the celebrities and the political candidates and the general political leaders in this country who commented on the entire issue, one of them was Morara. And in his statement, he said he adores Okiya Omtata and he would love to work with him. Work with him as who? As what? It tells you clearly that he's willing to position himself in such a way with a political party. He already has one, riding on the wave of the Gen Zs and standing tall on the shoulders of the Gen Zs who died and who lost their friends in June and July, in a movement in which he was not even a frontliner. I have never seen Morara on the streets. I only have one video, but I have seen Kasmuel on the streets. I have seen Anifo on the streets. I have been with Polo Kimani on the streets. I have been with Hussein Khalid on the streets. And I know some of these names I've mentioned are names that are not in the best books of Kenyans. But I'm mentioning people who have frequented our protests, and people who've been actively involved in the protests, in organizing, in attending the protests, and in the actual dirty work of organizing a protest, because it is hard work to organize a protest and carry one out. Boniface Mwangi is hated by several Kenyans who, in their straightforward thinking, see Boniface Mwangi as an opportunist who takes advantage of protests. I do not even love the man myself, but we've seen such characters show up for protests. I have not seen Morara frontlining protests. Never. Kuanzia 2017 tumekuwa tukienda protest. Hata hizi za 2024 tumekuwa tukienda protest. Morara alienda protest mara ngapi? Once or twice. We've been at the front line, because we cannot close our eyes to injustice and just ride on when the entire country now decides to come on. Kuna watu wamekuwa maandamano from the heart, from the first day ya June up to saa hii, hata ukiita wataenda. Hawajakuja kutake credit for what the work others have done. And there are few. And Kenyans should identify these youths. They are the befitting, say, leaders or the opinion makers of this movement, not the kind of opportunists the likes of Morara. So coming back to Morara, as I have said, he's a man on a mission, just like Ruto is, but Ruto's mission is different. Morara's mission is to ensure that he takes up this movement and controls it enough so that he manages everyone in this movement to the point that he does not have critics. So that when he has consolidated power for himself, he is in a position to negotiate with the serious candidates in 2027 and is willing to form a coalition with the likes of Kalonzo, the likes of Umtata, the likes of Natembea. He doesn't care about tribalism. He doesn't care about our agendas for better governance. He only cares about himself. But he masquerades as a savior to so many Kenyans, and the faster they demystify this entire issue, the better for all of us, because kama tungejua tungekubaliana vile tulikubaliana Ruto afai kupigiwa kura 2022, kama tungekubaliana, I mean hatukukubaliana, kama tungekubaliana Ruto is not a guy we should vote in 2022, we will not have the same problem we have today. Na kama hatutakubaliana na tuangalie tuseme, if we need younger leaders to lead this country, then we need the best. We need watu wako na integrity, we need honest people, we need visionary people, na tunahitaji watu wa kutupeleka mbele, sio kuturudisha nyuma, to the tribal politics that we are used to the conmanship politics that we are used to the say opportunistic politics that we are used to. We need younger people who are better off than the older generation. And if we will not agree on that, if we will not come to an agreement and a consensus that we need the younger people who are different from the older politicians, hapo nao tutakuwa tumepotea njia. We will replace the older politicians with younger politicians who are as bad as the older ones, because talk is cheap. Morara has been talking big on how he is not tribal, of how he is an accountable fellow, of how he would change this country for the better, of how he'd ensure that the monies that the politicians have stolen and stashed in offshore accounts is repatriated and brought back to Kenya. But the fact is, this is just big talk, because he does not practice that. He's a wheeler dealer, he's an opportunist, and he's another fraud. And if Kenyans will not come to a consensus on this issue, na tukubaliane, we need to do our due diligence on the younger people who will be fronting themselves for political offices in 2027. Tutaendelea tu kupotea. We have been replacing the older politicians with younger politicians who are as bad as them. Angalia mtu kama Jaguar, angalia mtu kama Jalango, angalia mtu kama Mohamed Ali, angalia mtu kama Ruto. Ruto is younger compared to the politicians we are used to. He's younger than Raila. We've been used to the likes of Akina Raila on the ballot. So look at these things from a better, if Kenyans look at these things from a better perspective, tutaanza kwenda mbele. Sio kureplace the older generation with younger generation, and especially a younger person who is as bad as the older one. See, to replace our older generation na a younger person who is better off than them. Angalia hao watu and their past political life. Who have they been supporting before? What is their true stand in matters governance? Mtu yote mwenye alikampenia Ruto na akamtafutia kura, huyo ni mtu kweli anaweza ambia Wakenya ati I have your best interest at heart? Na sisi wenyewe wote tulikubaliana na tukajua huyu Ruto haizi tupeleka mahali. Ruto is as eloquent as Morara is in Kasbwe. But the truth is they have one thing in common. They are all opportunists. They are willing to drive a narrative that they are pro-people and that they have your best interest at heart. But the truth is, they are only thinking about themselves. They are tumbocrats cut from the same cloth. And if we are not going to unmask these people, we are going to replace the bad politicians with equally bad ones and equally bad younger ones. It's even worse to replace a bad older politician with a bad younger one, because huyu younger one hata stay in politics for a longer time, atatupiga ukora for a very long time. I am not advocating for replacing older politicians with equally older ones who are as bad, but then it would make more sense if you would replace an older bad politician with an older bad one than replacing an old bad politician with a younger bad one. I mean, that's just the situation we find ourselves in, and we must recollect ourselves as a movement. Tujite kamiti, tukae chini, tuseme we understand. Our tenets were a leaderless movement, a tribeless movement, and a partyless movement. Going forward, do we still need to remain leaderless? Do we still need to remain partyless? And if we need to change that, then how can we achieve that? Should we have a transition committee? Should we have a council? Should we have opinion leaders who will drive this agenda forward? How can we get past the leaderless gap that we have? Because Morara is not our leader. He's not even a Gen Z. How can we get past the partylessness that we have right now? Can we have another political party for the Gen Z movement that holds the best interest of the Gen Zs at heart? Chama yenye ijaletwa na mtu opportunist mwenye anataka kutumia hii movement, and those young people who are non-opportunists, those authentic young people who have activism in their hearts and just probably want better for this country, wapo wengi sana. Wanaweza kuwa wajulikani sahi, but in the fullness of time Kenyans we start getting to know some of these serious activists out here, as young as myself, who have the best interest of this country at heart. And Kenyans should not tire in asking and doing due diligence on some of these activists, including myself. Mujue, who was I supporting in 2022? How have I been involved in the push for better governance? Usichukue tu mtu at face value. That is what we did with Kasmuel. That is what we did with Morara. Na tukirealize mistakes zetu, hapo ndio tutaanza kusalvage whatever we have. Because if we don't realize our mistakes, the Gen Z movement will die. The young people's activism and our voice will be stifled by the government, because the government has a campaign out there to dish out and dole out propaganda ndio wamalize the movement that we have. Wa set up a youth against the other, and they set us up against the already established politicians, because they will not take it sitting down that mimi nimeenda kusimama kama MP where I come from, na kuna MP wa hiyo region na ni wa UDA for example, ama ni wa ODM. If for example ODM and UDA still go into 2027 intact as one team, you do not suppose that Raila Odinga will take it sitting down that a young man from Homa Bay is challenging the Homa Bay governor. They will have to unite against the young people, and they will do anything to ensure they still stay in power.
Okay. Now, the issue of Morara Kebaso being, positioning himself as a potential presidential candidate, we have seen multiple Kenyans coming out to support his agendas. Wanamtumia pesa, they are ready to support him. Don't you think that this number is, inamtumia pesa, imetosha mboga?
In July and August and probably September, Morara was receiving good sums of money from Kenyans in Kenya and from Kenyans outside Kenya. And he was unaccountable as to where he took these funds, as to how much he received per day, and he was fishy about it. So some of the members in the Inject party, well, back then it was not a party, they were just his followers, and they were close to him and closer to him than the rest of Kenyans, started asking the hard questions. They wanted to know how much Kenyans have donated as of the end of business that day. And they wanted to know how much has been spent and how much is remaining going into the next day. It was only sensible for Morara to account to those closer to him, because they were with him all throughout the entire journey. They've branded him, they've made him whatever he is. Because beyond and above the videos he did on top of that Land Cruiser office, the entire branding of Morara has been carried out by young people, those that were at his foot when he needed them the most. His foot soldiers have made Morara what he is. But he was unaccountable to them, and he dodged their questions for accountability. So when Kenyans started asking the same questions, oh, and by the way, these Kenyans I'm mentioning, and the activists that were close to Morara, who've branded Morara and made him what he is today, the ones that were asking the tough questions on behalf of Kenyans, are the likes of my friend Joshua Okayo. Well, he's just an acquaintance, I should say. We don't really have a connection. We rarely talk. Engineer Evans Kimori and Patrick. I think he goes by the name Villager 254. Kenyans know these activists and they know they have the best interest of the country at heart. And these were the insiders in the Morara camp that were unhappy with how Morara was, say, spending Kenyans' contributions. You would say, I do not have a right, and they did not have a right to question and call for accountability for donations given to Morara. But it makes sense that we would call for accountability from our political leaders, but we would not call for accountability from a young man who is claiming to lead the Gen Z movement. It makes sense that we would be so comfortable with an unaccountable young person, but we would want accountability from the older politicians. It makes no sense, because that means we would be so comfortable in replacing the older unaccountable politicians with a younger unaccountable one. So when Kenyans started asking the tough questions, probably following the cue from the likes of Okayo and Engineer Kimori, Morara got rattled and he decided to answer to the questions from Kenyans. And by this time, the donations from Kenyans had dwindled. They had probably halved. If Kenyans were donating 500,000 per day, they probably were now donating 100,000. So when he saw that the resources he was receiving from Kenyans are almost coming to a standstill, he decided to answer the accountability question. He decided to provide. He did not even provide M-Pesa messages. He decided to start providing statements on what they have received as of that day, and he decided to start giving an expenditure summary on what he has spent on that particular day. But this was not the norm. Morara was uncomfortable in disclosing how much he has received and in how much he has spent. And it is in total contrast of what the Gen Z stand for. The Gen Zs want accountability everywhere. So it makes sense that he was not willing to account for any coin that he received from the Kenyan people until the Kenyan people and those insiders that were close to him, who he has now branded as moles, called for accountability. If I am to receive money from Kenyans, it betokens me, and the onus is on me to account to Kenyans without waiting for them to ask me the hard questions. I mean, it makes sense. It should come from me to account to Kenyans, because ni pesa yao wamenipea and they have trusted me to carry on this vision and to carry on this good work of accounting, of pushing for accountability from the government. So I cannot push for accountability if I am not willing to be accountable myself. So these Kenyans that were donating to Morara have since left his camp. They are not comfortable with the Morara they have now, and they have already seen that they made a mistake with Morara. If you go through the comment section in Facebook, say on X, on Instagram, on any other platform that Morara is on, at a TikTok, you will see how Kenyans are telling him the truth as it is. Kenyans are very truthful people and they are very straightforward. Watakuambia ukweli vile iko. Take your time, Kenyans. Go through the comment sections. You will see that Kenyans have refused to be carried bananas. Ujinga wa Kenya wamesema hawatabeba ujinga tena. And they are telling him the truth as it is, that hata kama uko ushago unaona unapendwa, sisi we will start a campaign against you, and we will ensure that we send this message to the entire country, and we will want to tell our mamas at home and our fathers at home that wewe ni mtu usiaminika, you are a fraud, and they should not continue contributing towards that initiative you think you are building, and they should stop supporting you by all means. Kenyans are willing to do that, and they have already said it, and I trust Kenyans to keep their word, because Wakenya wakisema wanafanya. So Kenyans are tired of the fraud that is that guy, and they wish he was better, because plug, to be honest, that idea was not bad. The idea of a political party is not bad, that is run and owned by the younger generation. The idea of fundraising to carry out civic education, or fundraising to support candidates, whether gubernatorial candidates or presidential candidates, is a good idea. It is even the idea that runs American politics. And I feel bad, I feel displeased that Morara had to take up such a noble idea, copying the ideology in America, and he had to make a bad name for this. Sasa ameharibu jina ya campaign fundraising. Hata saa hii mimi nikisema nataka kuwa president, niwaitishe pesa to fund my presidential campaign, Wakenya watasema si utatufanyia kama huyo mwingine. He has ruined it for everyone.
How has he spoiled this?
His failure to account for what he receives from Kenyans is his greatest undoing. And it has painted this movement badly, and that is why Kenyans are losing trust in the Inject party. Those that were close to Morara have um, already distanced themselves from the Inject party. They have walked out. They have resigned the earlier commitment to support Morara, and they are unwilling and non-committal to push for any agenda that Morara will come through with. And that is happening with the rest of the Kenyans. I know he will still have he will still have some followers who will still cling to him at the end of the day. Same way Raila still has some followers and Uhuru Kenyatta still has some followers. But the rest of the Kenyans, like myself, have decided and vowed to not follow him. Well, I did not follow him in the first place, but those that were close to him and those that were his strict followers have seen him for what he is, and they have walked away. You cannot lead a people that have walked away from you. And that is the same situation Ruto is finding himself with. Ruto has the authority that comes with the presidential office, but he does not have the power, because the power comes from the people. He has lost power because he has lost confidence and trust with the Kenyans. Looking at what Infotrack said the other day, only 1% of Kenyans trust Ruto now as it is. They think everything from him is a scam, and they see every policy that he outlines out there as another lie, as another hoodwink, and as another gimmick to try and salvage his dying political career. And that is the same feeling they have towards Morara. And I hope that feeling does not extend to the rest of the Gen Zs and to the rest of the activists who are pro better governance. Because if it does, then we will have lost a good thing. We will have lost an entire movement because a few guys decided to be frauds and to be conmen, and they would have ruined the broth for the entire litany and group of activists who held activism in their heart and who really wanted better governance. Those that were really in this because they believed in it and they wanted a better Kenya for the rest of all of us. If they manage to ruin the reputation of the Gen Zs, and if we lose the current reputation we have and the good standing we have with Kenyans, then we would have lost so much as a generation, because Kenyans now think that the Gen Zs are the saviors of the future. They think that if we trust these Gen Zs with the positions of power in 2027 or before 2027, our lives will change for the better.